Well, that's the introduction to Jacob Nordangård, his great track Rockefeller. That's put together by his Jacob and his great band Wardenclyffe. And I'd like to introduce him today. He's coming live from Sweden, and it's a great thrill to introduce him. I think just the simplest way is how Jacob describes himself. He says he's a geographer, media producer, and science historian. And he's also the founder of what I'd never heard of before called Doom Rock, and it's a group called Wardenclyffe. And Jacob has a PhD in science and technology studies, and he also has master's degrees in culture and media, as well as geography. And your PhD thesis, Ordo ab Cheo, was, far as I understand, was focused on the political history of biofuels in the European Union. And that was probably 10 or so years ago, Jakob. So you've been a busy man, and you've done lots of amazing things. So it's wonderful to have you on here. But that track was from Jakob's group, Wardenclyffe, called Rockefeller, which is a title also of one of his recent books, which we'll go into a little bit later on. So we're going to really just start with that amazing background, to hear a bit about your own journey through from the period of you started originally, it looks like, in printing and in media, and you've made your way through to be quite a celebrated guy now with basically bringing together information about what's happening with the globalist agenda. So I think that's a reasonable summary of what the story is, Jakob, but it's great to have you here with me today for the Sons of Issachar podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So tell me a little bit about your story and your background and how you found your way into this remarkable story that you're in today. And Jakob's put many books together, and there's a few books coming out in the near future in English. But just tell us a bit about your story, because it's fascinating.
Yes, well, it started, you can say, I mean, I've always been very interested in how politics work, and power politics, and politics in high places and so on. So it has been reflected a lot in I started out, I wanted to be a musician, and I have my band now, of course, but I started when I was a teenager, and I had these topics in my lyrics about how power operates. Then when I was in my late 20s, I started at University of Linköping in Sweden. And at that time, I was very interested in the cultural heritage of cities. I've always been interested in city planning. It has been a childhood obsession, studying maps and how cities function and everything. And when I started at this university, I was very interested in especially in the city I have moved to, Norrköping, and because it was a city that had been a lot of old buildings had been torn down during what we say in Swedish, rivningsvågen. It was a time in the 60s and the early 70s when almost all old buildings were torn down to put up more modernist buildings everywhere. And I was very interested in this. How did this happen? And I also happened to move into an apartment in at the street called Kungsgatan, the King's Street in Norrköping.
Right.
And I watched and I thought that when I moved there, it was such a very, very broad street. It was, and a lot of it was like very much traffic, cars everywhere. And then a day I saw the magazine, the newspaper of Norrköping. They had this old picture. Every week we had an old picture of old town, and that picture showed a little the street, how it looked before, and it was a narrow street with a lot of shops and a lot of people, and it was it was just for me, how could they do that? How could they actually destroy that the things they had before, and just create this anti-human traffic world?
It went from a friendly city to one that was inhuman. Really, that's about the same.
So I wanted to know about this, and that was my first. So I wrote my first thesis, my master thesis, about how this street, the King Street, how the political process, how it they decided to make it very a broad street, and more or less build a city highway through the city center in Norrköping. And I followed this process, and how very, I mean, it was also a mapping of the power of the city. Who decides?
So your geography studies were not only just what happened locally, but also politically within that city.
Yes, I started locally.
Yes.
And this was actually at my media and culture studies, but it was, I had this cultural heritage perspective on it, and and this during this time it was obvious that the ones who decide over the city, it's not the people. I mean, it's the people that lived on this street. They had nothing to say.
Yes.
In the matter. They protested. The shopkeepers protested against it. They could not do anything. It was the second in charge. It was the city planning council and the mayor, and but the first level, those who really decided, it was a very influential family in Norrköping called Lundbergs, and they became very rich because of this city development during the 60s and 70s, when they tore down all the old blocks, and they built their own new apartment blocks.
Right.
Higher rise building where we could have more tenants in the buildings and earn more money.
Yes.
So that in that way I found out the power, how power works on this local scale. And after that, I was very upset with how this planning obsession with giving room for the cars in the inner streets have destroyed this old structure. So I became kind of, you can say, more fanatic at the time, and I was kind of angry of the development.
Yes.
And they had also started to first they tore down the old city to build this building in the middle, and then they were done with this. They moved all the things out to the suburbs, to shopping malls.
Right.
and that upset me and even more because it felt so stupid. You destroyed what you had,
Yes.
and then you destroyed it, and then you went out in the suburbs and destroyed the city life even more.
Yes.
So
No, what an interesting situation for you, because as I understood from your story, which I've read a bit about, is that sort of led you on a trajectory where you ended up asking some bigger questions that
yes.
where you embarked on for your PhD. And because it's published in Swedish, I couldn't really come to grips with the PhD, but was your main focus in the PhD really around the story of the environment and climate, or did it have a different focus to that?
Well, my focus, it was because it evolved out of this project I had at the university. And then I went back, I worked for a couple of years. And then I went back to the university because I wanted to know, had come up and because this has something to do with moving out the shopping malls to the suburbs.
Yes.
So what happened was I was supposed to write an opinion about this because I was kind of upset. Why do we do it? So I wrote this opinion, and during when I wrote this, I asked myself, what are the arguments for not doing this? Why is this not a good thing? And one of these things was, I heard when I was like a teenager that the oil would run out in about 30 years. so
it's been running out.
I just started to, I have to know, but it's like 30 years ago now. Yeah. I thought for myself. So I had to dig into this, and that was the thing that got me into university for the second time. Because I started to read about the peak oil theory, and at that time it was early. It was just after 9/11, and the oil wars more or less in the Middle East. So the oil price went up, and it was a lot of oil geologists that were talking about this, and then that it was we're going to run out of oil now, and then it's they were very alarmist. Yes. And I got kind of scared at that time, and so I had to know. So I went to university, started to study geography and about energy and oil, and how do this function. And when I read so much about is peak oil a problem or is it not, and who runs the oil market.
Okay. That's what led you eventually through to the Rockefellers.
Yes, exactly, because I mean, so I know at that time the Rockefellers are very big into oil. Of course, everybody knows that. Yeah. And the Exxon and ExxonMobil and all the companies that we had started.
You didn't guess that these guys were the people that were
no.
The climate crisis and wanting us to get rid of oil.
Yeah, because at that time I was actually a member of the Green Party in Sweden. Right. So right. I was very into environmentalism and everything. Yes. I mean, if you were young at that time, you were into these things. And I also saw what they were doing to cities, and so I was upset with that. And I started with peak oil, and then eventually it came up a lot about how can we are the substitutes for oil.
Yes.
And it was a Swedish government report that came out at the time that talked about we can use our forests and farmland to create biofuels. And I started to investigate that.
Yes.
And that put me into this thing with biofuels. So I wrote two two student papers or theses about biofuels to actually, okay, how is it? Will it work? Can we just take this and put into the transport sector and everything will work? It doesn't work, of course, but it was but it made me more interested in how these things function. And
Yes,
at the time,
you were starting to say to yourself, something doesn't add up here. There's something,
yeah,
there's something wrong, and none of this makes complete sense. So
exactly.
that must have been so interesting.
Yeah, it was, because I mean, the thing they didn't talk that much, but they talk about energy security and Russia
Yes,
at the time as well. But the most focus was on climate change.
yes,
So everything was about how can we save the planet. We have to cut down the forests to
yes, no, exactly. That's it's very logical to cut down the
didn't
forest
make sense.
to save the planet.
Yeah.
No, it's a fascinating story, because one of the things I've been trying to, I just saw the summary, because you wrote a little book on your experience called something like An Inconvenient Journey, and
Yeah, exactly.
it sounds as though that was a book that arose out of your experience, that somehow you'd found inconvenient material with your research, and you must have come up to various types of roadblocks. Is that what happened?
Yes. Because I mean, I started as a PhD and a student in 2008,
Yes.
and at that time, I mean, I was still a member of the Green Party, and I eventually dropped out of that because I didn't like the climate madness. But I had actually, when I was a member of the Green Party, I started to study the climate science, and I thought to myself, I mean, I looked it up, and it was, I mean, they don't have proof of this. They are so certain in the media and everything, but it's no proof. This isn't science. So I was upset again
Yes.
because this wasn't scientific.
This
So
is this is all about models, and so trust
yeah,
us.
it's all about
Trust us.
morals.
Trust us. We have a model. But I was fascinated, Jacob, because I hadn't realized until I read your book on the Rockefellers that actually it was a Swedish scientist. He was the originator of the whole story of CO2 as a global warming. He didn't think it was going to be a crisis, but everything that we have today originated in Sweden in terms of this global
Yes.
warming hypothesis. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it is. Svante Arrhenius in 1896.
Yes, I mean he was a very prominent scientist and did remarkable work. But what was it really your supervisors, academic colleagues? Where did you run into the biggest trouble as you tried to just publish what you'd found?
Well, it started very early on during my PhD studies, because they thought, I mean, my supervisor first said, we haven't never had one with such experience and knowledge of the energy markets and everything
Right.
before. So they thought I was the guy. I could be some. It was I had a really good material before. But I stepped into some mines, some big problems during, because I started to ask myself, because every other PhD student, they wrote in their I mean their
Thesis.
that IPCC says the climate it will evolve like this, and this is a big problem. This is a big issue. And then they started to write their thesis.
Yes.
I didn't do that. I asked myself, because before this isn't sound science. So I asked myself, where did it begin?
Yes.
And who founded the IPCC?
Yes.
What are the story behind this?
Yeah.
Because I knew, because of my earlier experience with how the city works,
Yes.
and also the energy market works, that there are powerful figures working and lobbying for getting their views be seen and heard.
Yes.
So that took me into investigation of how climate change started, how and I of course came to Svante Arrhenius and the Swedish connection. And I think that is the big that was the big problem for me, because Sweden and has been so involved in this, and especially from the 1950s.
Yes, and I suppose not only Sweden but also Denmark and I suppose also Norway and Finland, but Denmark because you know, the former Danish prime minister was at the heart of so much of the work that, well, she was behind the key figure behind the Rio conference, wasn't she?
It was the Norwegian prime,
right?
Norwegian,
right.
Gro Harlem Brundtland.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, it's sort of an interesting thing that it's become. It was quite a. So your ideas that said, wait a minute, what's happened here, and are the powerful figures. This wasn't a popular finding because you just needed to accept that and press on. This is where we are, and we're all going to our doom. And we can fix things if we cut down all the forests to make it better.
Yeah, yes. And the thing is, it was all political at the university, because, and that was a kind of a shock for me, because I thought before going, I mean, especially when I came to my PhD studies, I thought that this is a place where it's possible to actually have different opinions, and we discuss these matters.
Yes.
It's not to create policy. This is to study policy.
Yes.
And I was at this climate policy center in Norrköping in Sweden. I was affiliated to this center, and I thought when I started it should be a center where you study politics, but it was actually a center where you created policy how can we influence people better to do the right decisions and so on. How can we build better political structures to handle the climate crisis? It was all about these things. And they also had the connections to the Swedish government and funding. So it was nothing that I assumed before. And then I came and started to question this.
Yeah.
Where does this originate from? And then I found that, okay, we have a Swedish government, but we also have very powerful figures behind this. And of course, I wrote the book Rockefeller, and that is because I wrote this working paper about how this issue had evolved. And I found, I mean, and this was in the literature about climate that were published at the time. They mentioned they mentioned that Roger Revelle started this in the 50s, and they had a meeting in 1963 at the Conservation Foundation, and they also had it was big before the Stockholm Conference in 1972 about the environment, and they had this meeting outside Stockholm or Uppsala at Vik Slott, where Svante Arrhenius were born. And at the Stockholm Conference, they discussed this, and then there was some conferences in the 80s that they mentioned this, the Village conferences, and this was the thing that set up the IPCC in 1988. So I knew the key events, and then I studied who was behind these key events, and it was eventually, okay, U.S. military and the Rockefeller Foundation, or Rockefeller philanthropy was very prominent in this. They were almost everywhere at this time. So it was just, what? I mean, these are the people that actually started the oil industry, and it has, such a huge influence. They were the bad guys when I was in the Green Party. It was, I mean, that's David Rockefeller. He is behind the Trilateral Commission and all these things. But it was I mean, discussed in the left at that time, not anymore.
Because the I think just to sort of give a little bit more background, the last week I've spent reading your book on the Rockefellers, which I can only get it in French, but it's called Les Rockefellers, Maîtres du jeu, which is basically masters of the game. And I'll just give a brief sketch of what I found, because what's extraordinary to me was it's generations of Rockefellers, commencing with the original John D. Rockefeller, but before that, his father, who was literally a snake oil salesman in America.
Yeah.
And Standard Oil was founded in 1870, and yet that family, through political connections and power, and they developed what seemed to be a very clever standard operating procedure, which was to identify clever people, form a commission or an international body, obviously pay people well to do things. But what I discovered from your book, it's extraordinary. There is actually no area of life that the Rockefellers haven't basically dominated and influenced. Not only the area of energy and oil, but also finance, politics, international affairs, information technology, even artificial intelligence are at the ground floor of that. Art and music, medicine, science, psychology, human behavior, architecture, and even religion. So it's almost beyond belief, isn't it? It's the most remarkable story that I've read. And in the back of the book, you have an appendix that has the number of international organizations that the Rockefellers have their fingers in. And it goes on for pages. There's dozens and dozens of organizations in every area. So it's quite remarkable. It's beyond any imagination, isn't it? We had no idea, most of us, even people who knew what the Rockefellers were about, but you've uncovered a lot in your book.
Yes, it is astonishing just to see it for yourself, because I mean, I knew about their influence before, but this was just too much. Just to see it with your own eyes, and all the connections everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, even people. I mean, we have even bought their critics.
Yes.
Like Naomi Klein.
Yes.
It's just. But wrote this shock doctrine about how Henry Kissinger and the Rockefellers behind influenced and stated coups and everything, and then now she's more or less on the payroll of that.
Yes, no, it is remarkable. I think you weave a number of stories through there. One of the things that really amazed me was I suppose the key role of Kissinger, who's still alive today, but his closeness to David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller ends up in China before anyone else. Next thing, there's a link with the bank, Chase Manhattan Bank, having very close links, then given a sort of a license to a Chinese bank, and basically, there was a huge commercial opportunity just through the political connections. And then, of course, the Nelson Rockefeller story was fascinating, because that looks quite sinister when you actually read some of the facts that you sketch out there, and how he eventually became vice president and almost president.
Yes.
Had Gerald Ford been killed, but in an unfortunate accident. But no, it's an amazing story, just the degree of influence. And I suppose what you do, interesting enough, in that book is to sketch out, the generations, who married who, and of course, right at the beginning, a Rockefeller married a key influential senator's daughter, and that senator was involved in the establishment of the Federal Reserve. So there's this political links. But what seems unique about them, Jacob, is the fact that they've been able to maintain that influence throughout the generations, and that's an unusual situation
Yes.
for the family as well, isn't it? So have you sort of followed what's happening with that generation, of the current generation of Rockefellers, and where their focus is, because they've got so many areas of work. What's happening with the Rockefellers today?
Yes, I recently gave a lecture that I followed from John D. Rockefeller III and the setup of a population council in 1952, and up to what's happening today with this One Health concept. And you find the Rockefellers involved every generation. And the last generation, now we have, until last year, it was Valerie Rockefeller that was the chair of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And they were behind the Special Studies project in the 50s that I have seen as a very, very important piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
A lot of thinking that evolved from that has influenced world politics ever since. And she's also the chair of the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, that was set up by David Rockefeller's daughter, Eileen, in, I think it's 20 years ago now. And they are, Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors are involved in a project called the Global Commons Alliance. And it's like the finale of everything.
Right.
This is an organization that will more or less decide our planetary boundaries, how much we can eat, what we can do, how we can travel, everything, and also put in accountability and punishment for not doing these things. So Valerie Rockefeller is the chair of this. They are the conveners of this project,
Wow.
and she is the granddaughter to John D. Rockefeller III.
Right.
And John D. Rockefeller III was, of course, the grandson to John D. Rockefeller himself. So we can see it's the same agenda, but it's pushed through the generations. They have had some, especially in the 70s, it was kind of a friction in the family. The young people were kind of mad on their parents because they thought they were kind of ruthless and so on. But it's like the more ruthless individuals eventually has continued this agenda.
Yes.
The right people.
It's interesting because I think in the conclusion of your book on the Rockefellers, you had a good summary, and I just wrote it down. It said the Rockefeller family has always had two intertwined goals: power and domination of a perfect, by their own definition, world. So it's power and domination that they've been able, and they've been very, very successful, because so many of the issues that we deal with today have been set in place by the Rockefellers and their various foundations and agencies and groups and study groups, and it goes on and on. It's hard to even come to grips with the amount of material that's there and what's happened. I mean, even the field of medicine was totally changed by the work that they did to promote a particular view of medicine. And it's quite remarkable the influence that that family has had in so many ways. And so at a big picture level, Jacob, is your view then these guys are wanting to see a centrally controlled apparatus of which they sit at the head? Is that the heart of the whole aim that they've had?
Yes, they are one of. They are cooperating with other influential actors in this. So, but of course, if you're creating this one world structure, it's obvious that they want to be a part of the power decisions in this. But we don't have in the Rockefeller family now those kind of. Before we had David Rockefeller, Nelson Rockefeller, especially Nelson Rockefeller was very outgoing. He was one that people know about. But the new Rockefellers, they are just continuers of their Rockefeller brothers' agenda.
Yes.
They have no. We have Stephen Rockefeller. He has actually. He's the son of Nelson Rockefeller. He was involved in drafting the Earth Charter and other kind of key documents that came out like 20 years ago.
Yes.
But now we don't have a Rockefeller that anybody know about.
Yeah.
So
they've gone underground a bit.
Yes, they are.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose there are many other players that are stepping up to the mark now with the Bezoses and the Gateses and the Elon Musks and others. Have you been able to find a link through any of those groups? I suppose one of the interesting parts of what's behind this is the fact that these foundations that these very ultra wealthy people have really ultimately have very little accountability and have enormous funds to push the world in whichever direction they want it to go. So it's pretty significant. It's pretty significant when you see what's happening, because these foundations themselves just dictate so much of what governments end up doing, don't they?
Yes, they do. They often, and that was one of the things that I found out when I was writing my doctoral thesis. It was just, okay, when big organizations, international organizations were set up, in the beginning you found like Rockefeller and Ford Foundation and maybe Carnegie setting it up. They were the early members, and then the member states from all over the world came into organization.
Yes.
So they are setting up things, and then they want they still give a lot of funds to certain programs and so on, but they also want the governments to step in and take over and start funding themselves, so that this big foundation can go to other areas and work with. So that's how they have operated, and also.
And those tools that they use are interesting to me, because we don't realize that things like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and these various bodies that became very influential, they're all started and funded with Rockefeller money, and have had they've had extraordinary influence geopolitically, haven't they?
Yes, they have. And the thing, if you go into the history of this, it is like the Rockefellers have. They state that they. It's like this is something that history has imposed on us to create this new world system. They talk about in the special studies project. Yes. But it's a project that, if you go into where did it start, you find the Council on Foreign Relations, and you find the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London.
Yes.
And you find the Round Table groups and Cecil Rhodes,
yes.
and British imperialism.
Yes.
So, and they had these ideas of creating this world state,
yes,
world culture and everything.
yes.
So the Rockefellers are more or less the, I don't think they came up with the idea. They were, became a part of this influential network that originates from England.
Yes.
And then the Eastern establishment, they became a part of this in America,
Yes.
and continued this agenda. And the Rockefellers had the most money in the world
Yes.
after the Second World War, and the world was in ruins. They could just build it back better,
Yes.
in their own words. And now they want to do it again.
Yes.
But that's the power structure behind it that I've seen. So it's not just the Rockefeller, it's people that are with power and influence. And I think also, if you talk about Gates and Bezos and these people, that came up with the IT revolution, information technology, that if you have that kind of power, if you get that kind of money, and they, I mean, at the start they are startups, they have investors that give them money to achieve something. Yes. And then they give more, they get bigger and bigger, and you have to give something back if you get this help.
Yes.
That's when so they. And I know that the Rockefeller philanthropists they have these philanthropy advisors that I mentioned that helps these new billionaires to set up foundations to work in these areas, with climate change, with health, all these areas. So they help with continuing this agenda.
Yes.
And then it's like they have to be a part of this club at the top. You have to do this.
Yes.
You can, if you go the other way and try to be independent from this, they will just destroy you.
Yes. No, you've got no chance, I can see, because the structures and processes have been created to shut any other possibility out. And I suppose what you said was interesting, because you keep on thinking this goes back a long way. There's a connection to people going back thousands of years that wanted to become a ruler of the whole world and dominate the world. Now, of course, the difference is that technologies are there to make that possible. But one of the things that I was interested in, and I don't know if you've got any further information, is the relationship of the Rockefellers to the story of the Freemasons and the ecumenical movement, because there's a religious, spiritual part of this story which seems quite significant.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about that?
The thing is that the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, their office is in a building that's called the God Box, and it's a building where a lot of the interfaith movement has offices.
Okay,
so I mean, they have been very into the ecumenical movement as well, and all these trying to fusing all the religions of the world, and also Christianity into one. It's just everything is one. That's what all they want.
Yes,
create
it's sort of like I've worked out from looking at your book and also some other material that if you hear the word one something, and if you hear the word smart, then you start to know we're in trouble, because
yes.
one world, one health, one this, one that, it's all designed to push us together. One faith, of course.
Yes.
And this interfaith movement because that seems to be a necessary part of the whole system. So it is interesting. I hadn't realized. So the guard box is in their building in New York. Is that right?
Yes, I mean the building is called the Guard Box.
Yes.
And yeah, it's in New York.
And in your book, you also point out that they funded an enormous amount of money for a church complex in New York. That must have been in the early part of the 20th century. Was that the time when that all happened? Because it seemed that they had quite strong Protestant connections at the start, but that's sort of morphed into a more interfaith ecumenical story in the last
exactly.
50 years.
I mean, they were Baptists.
Yes.
Yes, and so yeah, and especially through Stephen Rockefeller,
Right.
and also Lawrence Rockefeller, the brother of David and Nelson, was very into these religious matters.
Right.
And they were also inspired by a French Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a paleontologist and theologian that had these ideas, more or less fusing Christianity with evolution theory.
Right.
And that's a perfect concept for these guys,
yes.
Because it's like, okay, now this is the divine will.
Yes, because I hadn't realized until I looked at your book closely is that the story of eugenics is fused right through all the work and thinking of the Rockefellers from the early days, by the looks of things. And so they're very attracted to. They've dressed this up in different ways now, but they're very attracted to sort of eugenics and promoting the sort of the ascent of mankind. And I suppose it leads on to the idea of merging man and machine with the fourth industrial revolution.
Mm. Yes, very much so.
Is there a close link between these guys and people like Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, or are they operating on parallel tracks, but not necessarily with a lot of crossover?
The thing is, Henry Kissinger, he was the mentor of Klaus Schwab.
Yes.
At Harvard. And you find that Harvard is very, very important in everything that has to do with the World Economic Forum. So, and at the time when Klaus Schwab was at Harvard, David Rockefeller was the president, board of directors.
Yes.
The chair. And so they were very tied to Harvard and their programs, and the programs about international relations was the thing that started more or less the World Economic Forum, and they are still very connected today.
Yes.
With the Young Global Leaders program and so on. Yes. So this is more or less, and if you read Klaus Schwab, it's like reading the thoughts of David Rockefeller on how to run the world as well. So I mean, he's just I think he's a puppet that has been to further this agenda and give it an international flavor.
Yes, he's been a successful puppet because by himself he's not an attractive character, but he's been able to get on board all the major companies and countries and have extraordinary influence. And I suppose when you look at that big picture, Jacob, it feels as though we're being herded like cows and sheep into a future that they've got prepared for us. And it's, I suppose the analogy with animals is not unrealistic, actually, because that's the way some of those documents that you've uncovered recently speak about us. We humankind, we have to be treated like animals and pushed in the direction that they would have us go. And it seems to be very hard to escape this because all the tools, the sustainable development goals and the myriad organizations and systems, it's pretty hard to beat that system, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, and that's the thing with why it gets so hard for me at the university, because they have been so involved in education and everything, and from the beginning, even when I mean, when you are a little child, it's their worldview that is pushed upon us. It's very hard to escape from that, and you, when you are grown up, going to university, and it's all about, and now we have, I mean, Swedish universities is all about the sustainable development goals. It came very fast, and just so it's important to question it. You can't question it. If you question it, you're wrong.
No.
It's wrong. You can't think like that. It's just.
Well, of course, unfortunately, your Swedish young woman Greta has been very successful, and she's become a tool that's been used quite successfully as well. So I suppose it's hard for you because Sweden is at the heart of all the climate story and everything else that goes with it, which makes it very, very difficult. And I suppose ultimately, do you think that these guys have just got they call them philanthropists, and if we put them all together, have they got a sort of a desire just for the good of humanity, or is there a desire here really just to control the world, like some of the dystopian movies that have been brought out with a group controlling and a group underneath, and that's what they want to see as the end result with some of these masters of power in the universe today?
I think I think the the realists in this game, they have this. They think, and they also think that we can do it better. That was David Rockefeller said us. We can do it better than the politicians and ordinary people. If we do the planning, we will have a much better world. But it's a good world for them and for how they see the world. If we just can manage it, we won't have the same problems. If we manage it, we won't have the same criminality. We won't have all these problems that this old system had. But it becomes a totalitarian system if you're supposed to do it. So
you can see that.
But I also think that is a lot of people working for this, even in higher places, that actually believe in it's like the workers' paradise of the Soviet Union. But it will be a wonderful paradise. We just have to crack these eggs before. It will be a hard time, but eventually we will have this good paradise.
No, it's been a recurring theme, hasn't it? And I first came across some of the ideas around this from Patrick Wood and his books on technocracy and understanding the technocracy movement of the 1930s, where I suppose you see that happening. That comes through today, because the idea is, don't let the politicians have power. We need to have the technocrats. We need to have the systems and processes and controls. And those controls are now possible with digital IDs and central bank digital currencies and all the tools that now are being put in place. So do you feel as though we just have to give in and be shepherded into our future under the totalitarian dictators, or is there another option for us?
Of course not. I don't want us to be in that world. Of course not. So that's why I'm doing this work and writing, and that was one of the things that I had to continue my PhD studies despite what the resistance I got from the system. Because I knew, I have children. I don't want my children to grow up in a world that is dystopian. And also, I couldn't, if they thought I was a good student in the beginning, and if I had played my cards right, I could have, couldn't have been a professor now at Stockholm University or something, and saying the right things. But I couldn't do that.
Yes.
Because I knew too much about what was coming. So I instead had to step up and said, this isn't okay. This is a bad future for us.
Yes.
But I think we have alternatives. Of course we have, but because a system that they want to achieve, this is, I mean, it's all built on technology. It demands a lot of energy and effort to put this together and get it to function, and also it's against people's will to do this. I mean, they try to influence us to say that okay, we need it and we got to have it, but it's not. It's against our human nature to be in this. This is a this is an artificial system. They have to try to copy the real world and build a new copy over us to be able to judge us with social credits. But that's not their job. We have a bigger system. We have a natural world, a natural system that, I mean, and I think we have, as we experience in life, if we do bad things, it will eventually hit back on us and so on. It's you can say we have a natural social credit system. If you do bad things, you eventually end up in a bad situation, in a kind of your personal hell. So we have that, and I don't think you can create an artificial system that overrides this, because this is created by something much bigger.
Yes.
Than these people have done. So it can never function.
I hope you're right. I sort of have an idea from your own starting point, which is how did this beautiful old street in this city outside of Stockholm turned into a hellhole? And it was because there were influential people behind it to put various things in place that no one wanted. And I suppose that means we have to be very alert, don't we? Because you know, a lot of these processes, even the things of the World Health Organization, are coming in behind the scenes. No one knows, but decisions are made without any votes being taken to enforce various outcomes for us. There's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are being put right through society, and none of us really knows or voted for them, but suddenly they're being used. So we have to be very careful, and we have to be alert, and we have to be able to push back. Otherwise, we will be herded like cattle, won't we?
Yes, we will. And but the thing is, one thing they have in this system that they have created, I mean, they had to give us something with, I mean, the internet.
Yes.
And that's the ability to communicate over borders, so we can actually use the system that they have built to starting to coming together.
Yes.
I mean, of course, they try to prevent this now, and that's when we will have this censorships online and everything, where we'll connect it to digital ID, so that they can shut down a certain person immediately. So, but they have, in order to enslave us, they have had to give us something, and that what they have given us, we can use to our advantage.
Yes, I hope you're right about that. I was very interested to find that all your videos are still available on YouTube for the moment. So that was that's very encouraging. Just as an aside, before we finish up, Sweden was the only country that, because of it seems to me, a clever epidemiologist that really seemed to understand disease, but didn't force lockdowns and force vaccinations. Was that just because of was that something individual in relation to the key person in charge of public health, or was it a societal issue that Swedes wouldn't have taken that sort of lockdown and forced approach?
I think we had been doing it if the orders had because we are very obedient in Sweden, and they actually didn't have to have these harsh measures. We did it anyway.
Right.
We were, standing in Sweden in a queue. People, we do it. We don't question these things.
Right.
But one other thing, and that's one thing. And another thing is that we already have a technology. We have so much technology in Sweden, so we could go online.
Yes.
Directly and have our meetings and with school and everything. The rest of the world had to catch up.
Yes.
So I think they wanted to have a harder time for those countries, so that they will build the infrastructure that is needed for the next stage.
Yes.
The third thing is that the Swedish constitution didn't allow this.
Oh.
And that is something that has been changed now.
Right.
So the next time, Sweden, we will do exactly as everybody else.
Okay, so they haven't taken any chances. That's
No.
interesting. There was a constitutional change then, and I thought, oh well, Sweden's done something good, but it's you can see that the processes are similar and are being implemented. Do you think there's a Mr. Big behind everything, or do you think that this is just a group of powerful people that are pushing us in the direction they want us to go?
What was the first thing you said?
Is there a Mr. Big? Is there a key person somewhere behind this whole story, or do you think this is just a powerful group of people and families that have been operating for hundreds or perhaps longer of years?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger thing than we can imagine.
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
That goes into spiritual things.
Yes. No, I've got the feeling as well that you're right, that this is a satanic story, and I think you can see that in various ways, because it's destruction, it's destructive, it's controlling, and it's wanting to inflict various things on us that we don't want. So I think it's
an anti-human agenda.
Yes,
it's against humanity, everything.
That's a good thing. I have to ask you before we finish just about the sort of the doom rock sort of genre and your great band that I like very much, Wardenclyffe. But is doom rock a particular? Is it a favorite part of music in the Scandinavian countries, or is it something unique?
Doom is, it's kind of underground, you can say. It's not a big genre, but the founders of this doom scene, it was actually Black Sabbath at the time in 1968.
Yes.
So it and they were fairly big and has a big influence on the hard rock and metal scene ever since. So,
and your band is still playing?
Yes. The thing is, I have combined, because I the thing with doom, it's very fitting to what's happening, because
yes.
It's like we are in those times.
Yes.
So I have actually, I have a soundtrack to the Rockefeller book, and I also made a soundtrack to my the book that I published in 2020 about the pandemic. I also have a soundtrack to that book, and the next thing I'm going to do, or have started, is we actually recorded a new record called The Temple of Solomon. And that's about this agenda. That is about creating the artificial temple. Yes. And next year, I'm planning to do lectures about each of the songs of this album before the Summit of the Future in in September next year, when they will sign the Leaders' Pact. And then in this, I will tell the story through music and my lectures, and I hope to do a book about it in the end. So we are active still, and it's very connected to my research and what I'm doing, and it's also an idea to combine I mean, the analytical side and the artistic side that I have.
Yes.
Into. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating to see the way you've put your material together with music, and it's quite a unique. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but I think even with your thesis, you had a soundtrack, didn't you? I seem to remember reading something like that. So I'm looking forward to listening to the material on the Temple of Solomon. It is good for you to remind us and my listeners that there is this pact to come together next year and inflict even more control on us. And
yes,
hopefully there's enough people to stand up and resist it. But it's very difficult, because there are systems and processes and groups and reporting structures and so forth that make it very hard to deal with that. But it's wonderful to see the work you're doing, Jacob, and so wonderful to see the way that you've come through this and brought some real discipline and thinking to this in a country where, I suppose what you're saying, this is just become an accepted norm. You can't even start to question, because everyone says, well, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has found this, and so this, therefore, is what's going to happen. You started by saying, wait a minute, how did these guys get the authority to make all these decisions? So it's wonderful to see what you've done. We'll keep on following your work closely. I'm going to put links to all your material as much as I can find. And I know that the Rockefeller book, which I could only find in French, will be out shortly in English, I think. Is that right?
Yes, it's the second edition. Actually, it has an earlier edition is sold out of in English.
Right.
But the second edition will be out internationally on Skyhorse Publishing. So it's possible to pre-order it now, and it will be out in January.
Well, I'll give some information about that also to your own foundation. And I was also fascinated in the material of the book you've written called The Digital World Brain, that I think is coming out as well. And that's really aligned with this story of our common agenda, isn't it? So
yes, it is.
So you're doing a great job in just waking us all up and saying, no, wait a minute, we have to stop and resist some of these things that are coming. I'm so grateful for you taking this time on a cold Swedish morning to talk to me all this distance away in Australia. And it's only appropriate that we sort of go out with a little bit of Rockefeller. So Jacob, thank you so much. I'll just play a little bit of the soundtrack before we sign off.
Yeah, okay.
Consoling the game. Rockefeller, a fortune and fame. Enslaving the world through lies and deceit. Nowhere to hide in the global reach.
So thank you again.
Yeah.
So wonderful opportunity to talk together over this story, and I will stay in contact, and I would be very pleased if you could do another interview at some stage in the future.
Yes, of course.
Thank you again, and all the best.
Yeah, and have a good evening. I will take care of my day now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. See you.